All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to SharePoint Online Basics and Tips on this wonderfully hazy, smoky afternoon here in Kingston, Ontario. Thank you to the wildfires for keeping the weather interesting around here right now. So our session today, we're going to be going for a little under an hour, going through some of the basics about what is SharePoint Online, what are some of the features, what's some of the functionality, and a few little tips and tricks when it comes to day in, day out working with it from just a regular user's perspective. Now, before I jump in, the session is being recorded. It is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel at we'll say by tomorrow at noon, depending upon how quickly everything goes ahead and renders. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jamie Neri. I do work here as a full-time instructor at Learning Brick. We are based in Kingston, Ontario, as I mentioned. I am a Microsoft certified trainer and have been for the past 25 years, and I deal primarily with what you see there on screen, which is networking and infrastructure, working with 365, working with Microsoft Azure, obviously a fair bit to do with SharePoint, and also cybersecurity. Now, as we are going along here this afternoon, we do have the Q&A session available. So there is a Q&A option at the top of the screen that you'll be able to go ahead and fire off any questions. Myself and our VP of Sales, Bill Lennox, is also on the line here this afternoon. So between the two of us, we'll try to address whatever questions we can either in line during the session, or if not, we'll play a little bit of catch up at the end of the presentation. So feel free to go ahead and fire away any questions that you may have. Now, I've got it broken down into a few sections in here, but I mean, first and foremost, we're going to start off with, well, what exactly is SharePoint? Why do we use it? Why should we use it? What's my sales pitch as to getting involved in SharePoint? Because for a lot of organizations who are getting into the cloud, haven't really been working a lot with any of the online hosted options, transitioning from your local file storage and methods of communication into the online platform can be a little bit daunting, a little bit scary. So kind of ease your minds a little bit, we're going to jump into, well, what exactly does SharePoint bring to the table? So first and foremost, what is SharePoint and why should we use it? So let's think of SharePoint as basically being some type of a content management system. Not necessarily just document management, and that's where some people start getting a little bit confused in there. Can it handle documents? Absolutely. We're going to be seeing some of that. But it's more than just documents. So what can I use it for? Well, first of all, centralized tasks and planner integration. So if we're looking at to-do lists, if I'm looking at something not quite as sophisticated, let's say as a Microsoft project, where I'm looking at a 5-year or 1-year task that needs to be done, but I want to have a centralized location, not just for me personally, but maybe for some of my team, some of my groups. They want to have the available resources quickly and easily available to them and make it very simple to go ahead and track and see what's on task, what's falling behind, where is everybody at? Do we need to, kind of light a fire under somebody? It does integrate with Microsoft Planner, which, as I said, is kind of, a step in between using Microsoft Outlook for tasks and then going full-blown Microsoft projects. So it really kind of fits nicely in the middle there. It does integrate very, very easily with SharePoint. Now, further along that line, we talk about group calendars and schedules. So instead of just using plain old-fashioned Outlook, where I've got my calendar, maybe I've got some shared calendars for other people that are available. If we think bigger, if we look at our groups, I can have a central calendar maybe for the entire organization, maybe have specialized calendars for different groups, different departments, whatever it is that we're using, and control who has the ability to collaborate on it. So only the authorized people can go in there and see the information, first of all, let alone potentially going in there and starting to add on new items, edit existing items, or potentially deleting any items that are on there. Everything is ultimately controllable via permissions when we're talking about SharePoint. So it doesn't turn into a giant free-for-all. The right people with the right access to the right resources. Now, when it comes to the design and plan of that, that's where we start taking a look at the owner and the admin side of the world in here. As users, we may not be quite as involved in that process. I'm going to mention a little bit as we go along in here as it pertains to that, but that's one of the key things that I do want to kind of stress on right now. Just because we have this centralized storage area for a variety of different resources doesn't mean that this is going to turn into chaos. We make sure everything is planned, we make sure everything is controlled, we make sure everything is managed via permissions in here. Content management. Now, that's what I was kind of leading off with in here. We use this as a central repository for information. This information can be contacts. This information can be staff information. This could be financial data, HR data. It could be personal documents, project information, you name it. We can store it. We can secure it. And when it comes to the security, there's a wide range of options that are going to be available. So we have obviously permissions that I was talking about there before. We have things such as sensitivity labels, which means if there is protected information that is being stored, personally identifiable information, social insurance numbers, financial data, healthcare information, whatever it happens to be, we can make sure that SharePoint can detect it and restrict its access and how shareable that information will be. So once again, everything falls within our realm of control. We can also set up what are called retention settings and retention policies. So if I legally need to keep information for a set amount of time, if we're talking financial information, and I've got to keep it for 7 years, I can set up rules that are going to apply on to that type of data and say, thou shalt not touch this for 7 years. So if someone goes and tries to delete it, they will be forbidden. We will have an archived copy that will be kept so that there is nothing that we lose the paper trail on. Centralized contacts, once again, taking a step up from what we would be doing with something like an Outlook. So instead of me just having my own personal contacts, I want to have something that's going to be available to a wider audience. App integration with 365. Now, because this is part of the Microsoft Online Hosted Cloud Services, and we look at file storage and we look at file management, we want to have native integration with our 365 apps. Now, whether that is just simply working with Word, working with Excel, working with PowerPoint, as you're going to see in here, when we look at the collaboration aspect, it becomes a really simple process. And the benefit with everything being online is we can literally be anywhere in the world on any device. I don't have to have anything installed on it. I need a browser, internet access and a browser, and I can work with whatever my content happens to be. So native support for everything that's going to be integrated in as part of 365. Now, one of the big things that a lot of people are using, and you may have already been using, is when we take a look at the messaging and Microsoft Teams integration. When we use Microsoft Teams, we're getting the benefit of phone calls. We're getting the benefit of chats. We're getting the benefit of conversations. We can subdivide our teams into channels, which are basically chat rooms. And within our channels, we can go ahead and store files so that our teams have access to files that are relevant to them. Well, here's a spoiler alert for you. If you're working with Teams, Teams is storing all of its files in SharePoint. So it's already doing all of this stuff in behind the scenes, just people aren't necessarily aware of that. We get things like email notifications. So if I need updates on anything, someone has just uploaded a new request for some vacation time. Well, when that entry gets added on inside of my SharePoint environment, I might have it go ahead and trigger an email that says, hey, such and such a person has gone ahead and uploaded a new request. So I'll go, I'll take a look, I'll verify it, I'll approve it, I'll deny it, I'll ask for more information, but I can keep up to date. There are various options that we can use in order to keep up to date with any changes that are happening within our infrastructure. Now, the last point I already did kind of touch on with the app integration, and that is the web-based accessibility. I don't need anything special on my system to be able to go ahead and work with SharePoint. I need a browser and I need internet access, and that's it. All of my files are hosted online. If I want to work with Office documents, I can use the online versions of Word, of Excel, of PowerPoint, of OneNote, if that is the case. So we're looking at really a minimalist client perspective when it comes to the deployment and the management of all of these resources. Now, to be fair, if I've got the full version of Word and the full version of Excel sitting on my desktop or on my laptop, I'm going to get the full experience. I'm going to get all the bells and whistles. The web-based components of Word and Excel don't give me everything, but if I'm halfway around the world and I just have my smartphone, okay, that might be good enough for what I'm going to go ahead and do. So SharePoint as a content management system is going to give me all of these different options and more once we really start digging into the integration. So we want to, as much as possible, and every organization is going to treat this differently, of course, get our information out of our local environments and then into the cloud. Because that way I get the universal accessibility. I don't have to worry about people storing stuff on their local systems instead of on a map network drive. Everything is there, everything is accessible, and I don't have to be on computer A. So, accessibility and availability, some of our key points as we take a look at SharePoint. Now, I'm going to be doing pretty much just kind of live examples for everything. So I just have a few topics that are really listed in here just to kind of keep me on track as to what I'm going to be talking about. Now, when it comes to information storage and information management, fundamentally within SharePoint, you have two different types of information storage. We have what are called lists, and we have what are called libraries. So lists, in a nutshell, is basically like a table or a spreadsheet, if you prefer. Whereas libraries are going to be all about file storage and file management. So I'm going to start off today talking about and showing you a little bit here on lists. Now, before we go there, just basically, once again, might be new to the environment. Where do I go? How do I get in? So I have two accounts that I'm logged in as currently right now. This account where I'm going to be doing most of my demos, and then I have my other account that I'm going to use when it comes to collaboration. That way we can see a little bit of side-by-side action that's going to happen in here. Now, because it's a web-driven product, as I said, there's no locally installed version. So when I want to work with SharePoint, I'm going to go online into the browser. Now, all I did here is I just simply went to office.com. And office.com went ahead and just logged me in. So even though I was already in there, I just go to office.com. If necessary, it will ask for my credentials. But in this case, I'm already logged in, so I am good to go. I want to go to SharePoint. Now, if you already have a site that's been set up, chances are it's been communicated, hey, here's our SharePoint site. Here's a link that you would go to visit it. Now, in some cases, they kind of leave it to everyone to, I don't really want to say figure it out on their own, but SharePoint as an app is going to be available in as part of the Office ecosystem. So when I log into Office and we want to start by running any particular programs, what we do is over here on the upper left-hand side, we go to the app launcher, the 9 dots, nicknamed the waffle. So in case I ever throw out that term in here, don't be surprised. Not that I'm talking about breakfast, but we call that the waffle as the shortcut. So when I go and click on that, it will show me my standard applications that I have available. And lo and behold, we'll find SharePoint, in this case, pinned to our list of apps. In the event that it is not there, you can always go over into more apps, and then that will show you everything that you have at your fingertips in here. So I am going to go over and I'm going to launch SharePoint. And then that's going to take me to the SharePoint homepage. Now, this will show you your history, things that you have been working on recently, sites that you have been visiting, documents that you have been dealing with, maybe videos that you have in here. So I've got some meeting recordings from some sessions that I had done previously, but it will show you the various different sites that are available in here. Now you can see over here on the side in my recent sites, I have one that I've got set up dedicated for this afternoon that I just called it SP July Webinar. So I just go and click to browse over into that one. And that's going to take me to my actual site. Now, the good news about SharePoint, because this is a web-based product, everything is web page driven, which means your web team can go ahead and customize this however they see fit. This right now is a pretty stock, plain and boring, typical Teams website. So I didn't want to get too crazy with the configuration just so that it's like, hey, how is this working and how's that done? This is kind of the stock model in this place before a lot of customization's been done. Now, as we take a look around in here, a couple of major elements that you're going to see. So of course, along the top, I've got my information about the site that I'm currently on. I've got it branded in this case by our company here for Learning Brick. Tells me how many people are currently members, and the two accounts that I'm going to be using in here right now. And that's one of the things that you'll find out when you set up your SharePoint environment. You can create sites that are either going to be available to everyone in the organization or only available to specific members, so public versus private. This is, in fact, a private group, which is what you can see up here at the top. So it's only available to explicit accounts that I have allowed access to. No one else in the organization is allowed to browse and play around with any of this info. Now, down the left side of my screen here, I have what is called my quick launch. And this typically gives me access to most of the lists and libraries that are available in as part of this site. So as you can see in here, I have some things such as staff, for example. So if I go over to staff, this is a great example of a list. So like I was mentioning at the top, think of it as a spreadsheet, think of it as a table, whatever really comes to mind as you're looking at it. So I have some data that we're looking at tracking, we are looking at collecting. So I have a basic staff list in here with a couple of columns or fields, if you prefer. So we have the person's title, we have the first name, we have the last name, we have what department that they're in, their salary. Yeah, I wish, but however, it doesn't hurt to throw it out over in here while we're talking about it. When they were hired. So this is just a fundamental method that I can use for data collection. Now you'll notice there's no files associated with this. This is a spreadsheet. This is raw data. So as we build this information, and once again, as a user, and it does depend on the organization, IT may decide that users are allowed to go ahead and create their own lists and their own libraries, or they might leave it within their control and they will create it and then we work with it, we populate the information. So we'll do a lot of the day-to-day tasks, but we don't really control the creation and the overall management of the actual list or library. Going back to what I mentioned about permissions, everything is customizable in here. We are responsible for determining who is allowed to do what. So I've got this already in play. Let's give you a quick example on how this is going to work. So if I have a new staff member, let me pick on Bill in here right now. I've got a new staff member for Bill. We're going to add him on into the list. So I'm going to go up to the top. I'm going to click on the plus new button. And it's going to give me a pop-up screen where I get to play fill in the blanks in here. So for Bill, we'll put in VP Sales. First name is going to be Bill. Last name. Now notice last name has a red star. It's because I've made this field mandatory. So if I go ahead and I try to create this and I leave a mandatory field empty, system's going to get mad at me. So we have these nice little visual aids that are going to pop up and help us out as we're going along. Bill Lennox, department. So we take a look. Accounting, HR, IT, legal, marketing. So I can give people lists of options to choose from. Because if I let people type stuff in when it comes to departments, well, that's a recipe for disaster. How many people are going to misspell accounting? How many people are going to fully spell it out? How many people are going to use short forms? Is that going to impact when I want to sort, when I want to filter, when I want to search later on down the road? Absolutely. So one of the things that always comes in handy is we try to standardize this stuff as much as possible. If I have a set amount of departments, here's the list of departments. They're allowed to pick and choose, and that's that. So I'm going to throw Bill over into marketing over in here. Salary, Bill should be clearing at least $500,000 a year in here, so we'll throw that in for him. I'll go down to hire date. Now, hire date I have is mandatory. It's got a nice little red star on there. Now, let's say I accidentally forget about that. Okay, there's also a spot for attachments. So there is, hey, if I had a picture of Bill and I wanted to add it on, or I've got a CV, or I've got anything, like acceptable use policies that he's signed off on, I can include things like that as well. Very much like if you wanted to put an attachment onto an email. Okay, but there are a variety of different field types that I can bring in. So I go and try to save this. System gets mad at me, screams at me, kind of a mild scream, but I've got this red text that, hey, you can't leave this blank. Won't let me save this until we put in a value in here. Now, this is a date control, so here's a date drop down. We don't have to worry about, does it go year, month, day? Does it go month, day, year? Does it go day, month, year? We point, we click, we choose. That's one of the key things that we try to set up in here is we want to make this as simple an experience as possible as we can for the people who are working with the data day in and day out. I've got all my required information. I go ahead and I click on save. We've got Bill showing up in here as VP Sales. Now, if I'm working with this one at a time, I can go ahead and do that. I just go up to the top, click on that plus new, and away we go. However, if I have a lot of information that I'm going to be working with, or I have a lot of edits that I need to do, and I really don't want to have to go and select one item and go up and choose edit, and it pops up that screen where I can make my changes. It works, nothing wrong with it. But I did give the example of this is very much like a table, and it is very much like a spreadsheet. So what I can also do is I can go up to the top and say edit in grid view. This basically turns this into spreadsheet mode. So now I can point and click and I can just make changes in line in here and move, put in Billy because he's going to love that right now. Move between fields, move between entries in here. Go ahead and give myself a raise because I deserve it. Why not? Change any values that are necessary in here. So I can either work with everything one at a time, or once again, assuming I have the permissions, I can turn this into a spreadsheet, go crazy with all my information, and then say, yeah, I'm done. And I just go back up to the top and say exit grid view. And now I am back to normal. So this is a basic standard list in this point. Classic table, I identify the fields that are going to be involved, the type of data, so whether it is going to be a drop-down set of options, whether it is going to be a currency field or a numeric field or a date field, and determine whether or not it's mandatory. Now, there's more that I can do. I can put certain restrictions that are going to be in play. I can put a rule in there that says the salary cannot be greater than $100,000, and then it's going to get pissed off at the fact that I've now got Bill making $500,000 and things like that. So there's a lot that we can do when it comes to the design of these options. Now, there are other types of lists that exist in here as well. So, for example, when we're talking about types of data that can be stored, I had mentioned things like contacts, but I'd also mentioned things like calendars. You'll notice in my quick launch down the side over here, I've already got a training calendar set up. So we go in here. Now, this is a generic calendar that everyone who has access to the SharePoint site would be allowed to go ahead and come in and view. So as you can see, we've got a few things already set up in here right now. I've got an online training over here on Monday, an online training over here on Friday, meeting this morning, webinar going right now. So just a little bit of information from everyone to go ahead and be aware of in here. Now, same fundamental rules are going to apply in here. If I have the ability to come in and make some changes, I can go ahead and start editing, I can start adding, I can start deleting. Maybe we've got a follow-up session that we want to look at here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I can go over here Thursday, 9 o'clock, point and click, and say I've got a follow-up meeting about SharePoint. Start, date and time, end, date and time. Let's say I'm going to need a good, let's say, 2 hours for this. So 11 a.m. So tomorrow, the 16th, 11 a.m. Click my check mark to confirm that date. And once again, there's a spot to add on attachments. Now, this was a pretty stock calendar that I had just thrown in here and plugged in a couple of examples in here when it came to actual meetings. I can, very much like that other list in here, add on some custom stuff. So I might have an item in here that's going to include what's the agenda for this meeting. I might have some notes that are going to be included. I might have some specific documents that need to be referenced, links to external websites, you name it. I can include it. I save my entry. We have that listed and we have that available. Now, I'm going to switch gears here for a moment. I'm going to flip over to my alter ego. So this is my other account that I'm currently on here as right now. So if I jump over here, I'm sitting at the home page. So we've had these updates that are occurring. We can work on all of this stuff and we can see the updates pretty much in real time. I jump over here to staff. I see the entry that was put on over in here for VP Sales and Marketing. I jump over to my training calendar and I see the SharePoint webinar, I see the on-site, and there's that follow-up meeting. So I don't have to worry about, hey, this is going to take 15 minutes before this synchronizes and I can see what's happening. We can see these updates and we can work on all of this stuff simultaneously. Now, that in and of itself, some people are thinking, oh, hang on a second, that could be pretty dangerous if we got a bunch of people in here working on things at the same point in time. I agree, 100%. This is something that requires careful thought and consideration. Do I want everyone coming in here and at least being able to read this information? All right, read is one thing, but being able to edit, being able to add, being able to delete, that's something that we have to think about. Now, when it's a list, so whether it is just, as we said, a calendar, whether it's contacts, whether it's my own custom spreadsheet or custom table, okay, we're just dealing with raw data and multiple people, yes, can coexist. When it comes to files, that's a little bit more of a challenge. We're going to see that once I start getting into my libraries in a few moments. Now, I'm going to backtrack slightly and I'm going to go over to staff. Now, I don't have a lot of information in here, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to edit in grid view, and I am going to add on some new people in here. So I am going to do my Excel tricks. And very much like Excel, if you've ever used autofill in Excel, I can do the same thing in here. That little circle in the bottom right-hand corner of a cell, I can drag down and have it auto-complete as I'm going along. All I'm doing is generating some data so I can demo a couple of things in here. So I got VP Sales and Marketing. I've just got Salesperson. And then I have got Web Designer, let's say. Change some names up in here. So we've got Billy Bishop. And I have got Bob Lennox. Our salesperson is not in HR. They're going to be in sales. Our web designer is going to be in, let's put them in marketing. And I'm also going to put Bill back over into sales, just so that I've got some changes. I also got to dock how much these guys are making. All right, now we're good. So I've got some content. And as my users are in here, they're in, they're working, they're making their changes. And as I said, if I jump back to my other account that I was logged on as, and I go over here and I look at the staff list, they'll see all those changes right then and there. Now, while I'm working with this information, another thing that comes in quite handy are what are called views. Views allow everyone to tailor what they're looking at and how the data is going to be presented. Because I might have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of entries that are inside of a single list or a single library. That's not an exaggeration. It can handle theoretically up to 30 million entries. Now, there's going to be some issues if you've got 30 million things inside of a list, but theoretically, that is the upper boundary when we're talking about these. So when I'm looking at this, I might want to have everything sorted by last name. So I can go and click on any of these and say, hey, let's sort by last name. Or I only want to see people who are in the sales department. So if I go over to department, I might say I'm going to filter by department and say only show me those people in sales. That way I can focus on what matters most to me. And as I am doing this as account number 1 in this case, if I switch over to my alter ego, it doesn't impact me. When I am working with the data in terms of how it's being displayed, that is personal. That is my custom look and feel. If someone is editing information, if someone's adding information, we see all those updates in a timely fashion. But I can control, I want it sorted this way. I want it filtered this way. I want it grouped by department. So I'll do that one in this scenario. So I'm going to go up to the top here and I'm going to do a group by and say, let's group this by department instead. So now it's grouped by IT, then marketing, then sales. And these are all basically collapsible lists in here. So once again, I can focus on what matters most to me. So it is flexible in terms of presentation. We will see the updates as we go along. As I said, I can filter, I can sort, I can group. I can also save the look and feel while I'm in here. And this is where you get into adding a view. Now, I'm not going to dig into that one here today because I do want to move on into things like our libraries and our collaboration. But that's our first major element when we're talking about SharePoint, and that is lists. Collections of raw data, tables, spreadsheets, however you want to look at it, is not associated with working with files. So, next section, document libraries. So document libraries are all about file storage and file management. In each of these items in staff and in the training calendar, I don't have to have any files. There's nothing in there that includes that. Now, I have a couple of libraries that have already been set up. So inside of every site, by default, the system will always create a generic documents library. So as you can see in here, I've put in a PDF file, which is a student handout that I usually give out for people who take the full SharePoint user course with all the kind of walkthroughs and tips and tricks. And then we also have 2 different folders in here. We have a folder for policies and we have a folder for procedures. Now, without getting too deep into the discussion, when it comes to working with folders, that's a very divisive topic. Inside of SharePoint, you really don't need to use folders anymore. But a lot of people will look at it and it's like, well, that's how we grew up. That's how we had to store everything. If I'm storing it inside of my normal documents or on my file server, I got a folder for this, I got a folder for this, and it becomes a very hard habit to break. Inside of SharePoint, it's actually much easier to find documents if I don't use folders, but I use the appropriate fields or metadata to identify this is a policy, this is a procedure. It's very easy to sort, very easy to search, very easy to filter based on that. So I'd include that in here just for the sake of argument. And that's because this is what a lot of people are very familiar with. Old habits are hard to break, I understand. So I've got some various PDFs that are listed in each of these. And if I go into procedures, same thing. And in this case, I've got Word documents, I've got PDFs. So it'll allow me to work with and store all of these different types of files. Now, I've also created a couple of custom ones in here. So if I go over into exercises, this is one without any folders that has been set up in here. So it's got a couple of Excel spreadsheets, a couple of Word documents, and a couple of PDFs. And last but not least, I've also got one called expenses. And this is one of the approaches that a lot of organizations like to take. Instead of having these generic documents or exercises, I'm going to use this as a dumping ground for a lot of different files. We can start to create libraries that are going to serve specific needs. So in this case in here, I've got a spot where employees would be able to go ahead and submit their expenses. They would fill out whatever the necessary file is. They would go ahead and upload it into this location. And then, as I said, maybe I have a trigger that's going to happen that says, hey, such and such has uploaded a new expense. And that's going to send me an email, or that's going to send me a Teams notification for me to go ahead and review and determine what the next course of action should be. So my libraries are all going to be based on my file storage and my file management. Now, as working with these files, I have got file folder just stored over here right now with just a couple of sample files I'm going to go ahead and use. So because I'm in expenses here right now, let's say I've got an expenses file that I need to go ahead and upload and submit. Okay, well, I can do this one of two ways. I can either go over into my library, go up to the top and click on the Create or Upload. So I can either create a brand new Word document, or brand new folder, or a brand new Excel spreadsheet. Or of course, if I have an existing file, I want to go ahead and say that I'm going to do a file upload. And it's going to say, okay, tell me what file are we going to go ahead and upload in here. So I'm going to go into my webinar exercises and that expenses file. I choose to upload it. There it is, uploaded a few seconds ago, says who uploaded, so modified by. So there's also going to be a created by. So once again, there's a lot of columns that I could include in here. But that's live, that's recognized, and that's ready to go. Now, I can work with that file in here as well. So if I didn't complete it, or I have it partially completed and something else needs to be done, I can open this a couple of different ways. Now, if I were to just click on the file name, depending upon how the default was set up in the system, that will go ahead and open this either directly in the Excel application, if you have it installed on the device that you're using this, or as a failsafe, it'll open it up in the web browser. If you want a little bit more control over the process, you can select the file as I did here already, and you'll notice my first button over in here will give me the ability to say, do I want to just open this up in the browser, or do I want to open it up inside of the application itself? So for the sake of argument, I'm going to open up this one in the browser. Brings it up in here. Pretty blank, pretty boring at this point. So let me play some fill in the blanks in here. Name, Jamie. Date, well, we'll use today's date in here right now. Food, let's say I'm going to claim $500 for food. Gas just jumped up, so we'll say $1,500 for gas. Hotel, $2,500. Miscellaneous, got to be at least a good 10 grand for miscellaneous. And watch how fast this would get rejected. But I go ahead and I play fill in the blanks. Now, because this is being hosted in SharePoint Online, do I need to make a conscious effort to go ahead and save this? No, I don't. And we can tell that by just taking a look at the top in here where it shows my file name, but I also have my cloud symbol. It says, hey, last saved just now. It's hosted online, which means it is going to be saved automatically. I can just go ahead and close this file. No prompt to save, nothing like that. But it's there. It's updated. So if I go back and I click on it, shows everything's being fully completed. Now I'm in here right now working on this file in the online version. Okay, now I got to keep tab on who's who in here in this case. So I've got two different accounts who I'm logged on as my alter ego. So I'm actually going to flip this around a little bit. I'm going to open this one as my actual normal account. So I'm going to open this in Excel. And once again, it doesn't matter if I'm using the app or if I'm using the online version. And as you can see, this is the full application, the full version of Excel, and it tells me autosave is on. So I can go ahead and work with this automatically, make my changes. Now, one of the things I do want to talk about, though, is going to be collaboration. So with this, having these files centrally stored and available, for the accounts that have access to these resources, they will be able to see the changes. We saw a little bit of that when I was doing the lists. I added on a new entry. When I went on the other account, we saw the updated entry. Okay. If I go in and start editing some data, we'll be able to see that as well. We can do the same thing with files. So I am currently under one account, okay, the actual Jamie Neary account, currently in my Excel application on my computer. Have the file open, see all the data. If I flip over to my alter ego, okay, which is called Jamie Online, if I go over to expenses, and I go and I select the expenses file, I'm going to open this up in the browser. Now I'm in this file right now, and my other me is also in the file right now, and we can see that. If I take a look in my upper right-hand corner, it shows me, hey, Jamie Neary is in here right now and is currently on cell B10, and I have that placeholder showing up there right now. Now, my alter ego, let's go ahead and put on cell B4, which is today's date. Let's flip the script a little bit. I'm going to go back over to the Excel, and this is me as Jamie Neary, and I see that, oh, Jamie Online is sitting on cell B4. There's the placeholder for them. Now let's give you a true side-by-side in this case here. I'm going to put the two of these together so we can see in real time what's going on. So as my Jamie Online account working in the browser, they say, no, 10 grand, way too much. Well, the second I clicked on it, we saw the update over in here. Let's say they dial that back to 1,000, press enter. Within 2 seconds, we see the change that has gone ahead and occurred. And this is all going to be trackable information as well. Now, as I said, maybe I don't want to have a whole bunch of people in my organization coming in here and working simultaneously, as in working in the same file in real time. This is a feature that can be controlled. We could set this up so that it is going to be run under a single user source control. So in order for me to work with this file, for example, what I would need to do, just flipping everything over in here, is I would need to go ahead and basically check out a file. When I check out a file, that's basically me putting a lock on it. Other people could go ahead and view the information. No one else will be able to edit that file until I check it back in. So that's an extra step of protection that I could do. So if I needed to make sure that I am going to work with this and I want nobody else making changes to this file, I can select the file, go over into its settings, the 3 dots or the ellipsis, okay, and you'll see a whole bunch of things. I can share it with people. I can control the permissions. Of course, I could delete the file. But if I actually go down over here into more, I have an option to go ahead and say, I want to check out the file. When I have it checked out, there's going to be a symbol that notifies that I do currently have this checked out, and other people will be made aware of that as well. When I flip back to my alter ego and I refresh the page, we see there's that little marker that says, oh, Jamie Neri checked out this item, which means if I try to open it, okay, I'll be able to see the file, but it's read-only. I, as my alternate person, cannot go in and make any changes while someone has it checked out. So we can decide within our libraries how this is going to work. Is this just going to be a document repository for people to upload information? Can people read the contents of info? How many people are going to be able to modify the information? Are they able to modify everything simultaneously, or are they able to check it out, as I just did, put it under single user source control, and then everyone has to wait until that person is done with it, and then the next person can go in and make their changes. So there are a variety of different tactics that we can use for this. Now, I went ahead and did the creator upload, but my other option is just as easy. So if there's any extra files that I need to add on anywhere, all I have to do is just basically, if I have it open inside of my screen, I can just literally drag and drop. And that will then go ahead and upload that file directly into that library. So there is the option to go ahead and either upload it this way, create a new file this way as well. So I create a brand new blank Word document or Excel spreadsheet, or we upload our existing files using drag and drop. And as far as the collaboration is concerned, as I was showing you, that is something that we can control, but that is one of the native features. We can allow the people who have permissions to come in and collaborate simultaneously on all of this information. Now I go in, I make my changes. When I'm done with it, I say I want to check it in, and I say done with changes or whatever note that I want to add on in there, and go ahead and check in the file. Now that it's checked in, someone else could go ahead and open it and work on it and see whatever the updates were. So a lot of SharePoint's going to boil down into those main concepts in there. We have our lists for, I don't like saying raw data storage, but it's not file oriented. Storing whatever types of information, calendar, contacts, staff, invoices, HR, you name it, whatever you can think of, a simplistic kind of spreadsheet environment, and we can put rules that's going to determine how things are presented, what's allowed to be stored, what's not allowed to be stored. Every user has the ability to go in, not only to the list, but also to the libraries as well, and configure how they want to see things, how they want to sort, how they want to filter, how they want to group. They can use that same tactic on any of my lists and any of my libraries. If I go over to exercises, and then I decide, hey, let's go ahead and let's do a filter in here. So if I go up to the top, I can say that I want to only go ahead and, well, like I said, group by, or if I want to filter, I can do these options. My filter option for files is actually over in here. I only want to see Word documents. I can go up here and say, just show me Word documents. It shows me that on the fly. And once again, what I see and how I choose to display the information is different as to how everybody else wants to display their information. We can work with the data however it best suits us. And then at the end of the day, as I said, everything is ultimately going to be governed via permissions. So we are in control in the SharePoint environment to say, here's who has access to this site. Here's who has access to this particular library of files. You could even do this on individual files if necessary. It becomes a little bit of a pain to administer if we start doing it file by file, but if absolutely necessary, we can go down that road. All right, one final thing, and then I'm going to wrap it up in here. And this goes back to changes that are happening with a file. So in here, I went in, I updated, I made some changes. One of the other nice things about having this stored online is we all know that we've got those people who like to have backup copies upon backup copies upon backup copies of files. When we have things hosted in SharePoint, not necessary. So when there are updates that are happening to a file, if I go into the file, every file is going to maintain a version history. So from when it was uploaded to every subsequent set of saved changes, the system is going to show me every single one. This was my first upload when it was blank. This was my original filling it out as me. And then this was my alter ego, Jamie Online, who went and cut down my $10,000 miscellaneous expenses back to $1,000. So we have the full chain of events that is preserved. And if necessary, if it's like, hey, that wasn't supposed to be updated, we could actually revert back to a previous version. I could go and restore to a previous point in time if necessary. So we get a lot of flexibility when it comes to working with and managing content. All right. So that was my kind of broad overview as it comes to working with all things SharePoint in here from a user's perspective, looking at our lists, looking at our libraries, how we can store and work with things day in and day out. Bill's rejoined our session in here. He had to step out for a quick call. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill to talk a little bit about our upcoming promotions.
Thanks, Jamie. So for the existing courses that we have running, on the screen, you'll see some stuff. It's called GTR. So for those that don't know, GTR means guaranteed to run. So these classes will run whether there's one person or whether there's 12 people in these classes. So SharePoint end user and SharePoint site owner. There's two different classes running, one in August, one in September for each. The regular price is $7.95. We're offering it to those that are attending the webinar for a special price, which is 30% off. You can see at the bottom there. If there's specific services that you're looking for, whether it's Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Power Automate, various different courses, we're happy to talk with you and build some type of a custom design delivery. The clear thing is, and again, sorry, I had to step out, but we don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. Just because, say, client A went and did this doesn't mean it's going to be a fit for client B. So what we like to do, or what I like to do, is we do a pre-session with the individuals, discuss what your needs are, make sure we build something that's going to hit all your checkpoints. And then as the training is going on, we do some spot checks, make sure that everybody's comfortable, make sure that the learning curve isn't too steep, everybody's coming along. And then once the training's done, we send out evals to each member of the training, and we try to explain to them, be as honest as possible. We want feedback, and then we offer to even perhaps have a session after the call is done, whether it's just an hour. We bring everybody back on, we jump on another call or another session like a meeting or whatever, and we just review any questions that may have come up since the training. So with Learning Brick, the key to this is customization, pre, during, and post support. So just keep that in mind if there's anything that you guys are looking for as we go down the road.
All right, thanks, Bill. So beyond that, that is basically the end of today's session. If you do have any questions, I'm sure most of you have been dealing with either training or Bill, so email addresses are there and available. So either training@learningbrick.com for just some generic questions. If you need to speak directly with Bill, once again, bill@learningbrick.com. If you have anything that's a little bit more geared specifically towards me about certain scenarios or what have you, I'm just simply jamie@learningbrick.com. So the Q&A session is available right now. So if you do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and fire away. If not, thank you for coming. Hopefully you enjoyed, and look forward to seeing you later on down the road.